It was very ambitious. I mean, compared to the first Alien, which was very small and claustrophobic, this was a big, kind of heart-pounding version of Alien.
The budget this movie was slated at and the movie that they were trying to make was very ambitious.
There was a feeling that we were working on something that was going to be a landmark and that whatever we had to go through would be worth it.
From the time we're children, we are inherently afraid of that which we don't know and don't understand, but it's also in our nature to be curious and to go into those dark places and look around with a flashlight. But God forbid that flashlight should ever fail. Ridley Scott made this film that I think just stunned the world, and I was one of the people who was stunned by it when I saw it. And a few years later, when I became a filmmaker myself, I actually, saw an opportunity when I was asked to write the second one I wanted to make a film like that. I was so impressed by the world that he created, the characters that he created, and the design. But I think that there are many accomplishments in that first film, and he really set the bar very high for science fiction in general.
We had been planning on doing a sequel, right away. Well, Alan Ladd was there, talking about it already. And then he left, and I think this was when Marvin Davis bought the studio, and there was Norman Levy, who was running it, and Sherry Lansing, I guess. She had less to do with it. It was Norman Levy who was really opposed to it, I was later told. And they just didn't want to do it. And, so we weren't pushing for it. We had an idea about how to do it, and we had, thought they should do it, but we didn't think that was really, And finally, there was another change of management and another, new group that came in. And one of them stopped me in the parking lot when he said, I knew him. He said, "You guys have been talking about Alien. He said, so what do you want to do?" So I kind of told him the story that was a cross between Southern Comfort that Walter and I had made since and the Magnificent Seven that we were working on at the moment. And he said, "Great, that sounds fine." Good. We then all had we all had a meeting, and we were on.
When we were casting Terminator and we found Arnold Schwarzenegger, we were going to start shooting in summer of 1983, and we were going to shoot in Toronto. However, Dino De Laurentiis had a preemptive option on Arnold to star in Conan 2: The Destroyer. He'd already made the big hit Conan the Barbarian, and he preempted Arnold to star in that film, which meant that we couldn't start shooting for about 9 months. Now, that wasn't enough time to do another movie, but it was enough time for Jim to take on a writing assignment.
I had met Jim Cameron because Larry Wilson, who was our head of development, sent me this pile of scripts with a big recommendation for The Terminator. And so I read The Terminator, and I thought it was real good. And then at one point, I think when we really were now looking for a writer on Alien 2, I thought, well, why not him? He'd probably be he knows this movie, back the first one probably better than I do, backwards and forwards, So I asked him if he wanted to write that, and he did. And I tried to get Fox then to take an option on him as a director. They didn't. And he, wrote a draft of Alien, and then he went off to make The Terminator.
By the time we started shooting, however, he'd written about 90 pages, and he was still in the second act, and it wasn't a completed script. However, the people at Fox read it and loved it and said, "You know what? We're going to do the unthinkable. We're going to wait. We're going to wait until you're available to finish the script. And if your directing debut is, well, it really wasn't a debut in that he'd already directed Prawn to the Spawning, but if this film turns out well and you demonstrate talent in the directing field, we'll also let you direct. I'm not sure they were telling us the truth at the time, but we chose to believe it. We were naive, and I think that in Hollywood, when you're starting out, it helps to be naive and idealistic and believe that people are telling you the truth. And in this case, it turned out to be something that came to pass. If Terminator hadn't been such a success when it premiered, I doubt that Jim would have been brought on to direct.
I had worked for Roger Corman at his studio in Venice, and we did a film called Galaxy of Terror, which was Roger's definitive paean, to be charitable, to Alien. And I had worked on that film with some people that are actually involved in this production, and studied the design of the film. And I had already worked as a production designer before that. And I was working as a designer and an effects man. Alien seemed to really bring it all together in terms of design, and that's what attracted me to the project, the opportunity to create another world, basically.
From the time we thought about tackling it, Jim's perception was, we're doing a sequel, we're not doing a remake. We're not trying to do a gothic horror film, we're going to do a combat movie. And that was how we perceived being respectful of the original vision of Ridley Scott and not trying to remake it.
The fans of the first film are so powerful in their, I mean, they're so entrenched in the vision that Ridley created for that film, that to do a clone of it or to take one sort of small baby step away from it would not do. So what I've tried to do is take what I personally was interested in from that film, certain aspects of the alien's life cycle that interested me, the Ripley character, which interested me greatly because of the fact that it's a strong female character and that sort of thing, and brought into it a whole other area of science fiction that I've also always wanted to see realized, which is the idea of the military in the future.
Sigourney was wary. She wondered who are these kids who want to make the sequel to a film that she was rightfully very proud of. But from the first meeting, when Jim told her the direction he wanted to pursue, she was interested.
I was making a film in France, and I suddenly got this complete finished script that was all about Ripley and this little girl, and changed the nature somewhat of the aliens, and it was set to go. I mean, it was like, can you start in 3 months? And I remember thinking, God, I can't believe that no one even mentioned it to me. But I mean, I was thrilled. I met Jim Cameron shortly after that and loved working with him.
Sigourney read my script, my first draft, and she was, on the one hand, very, very critical of certain small things that she said her other character, that her character as established in the other film wouldn't do. And simultaneously, she was very complimentary, saying that she thought that I had really hit her character on the head as long as we cleaned up those details. And she was overall really thrilled with the direction that we'd gone in.
I felt he'd fleshed out the character of Ripley. I think it's hard to write the character of Ripley because most writers would say, write her like a basketball coach. All right, people, come over here and let's do this. And it's like. So he really captured her and made her this renegade and someone who wasn't, 200 years later, her daughter had died. It was a great beginning for the character to feel that kind of isolation and rage, I think.
She came to it when it was visually and dramatically a fait accompli. So I have to give her a lot of credit for not rampaging through it and saying this won't work, that won't work. She approached it as, right, I see the direction you want to take. This is how my character would respond in that situation. So it was a dream for me as a writer. So I took her input on how she would react. She speaking as Ripley, I wouldn't do that, I would do this. Wouldn't I be a little more angry here or a little softer there, that sort of thing. And applied it all back into the rewrite.
Then there became a contract negotiation in which Fox was not necessarily willing to pay her the amount of money that she wanted, and asked Jim to pursue a storyline that did not include the Ripley character, which he balked at. He refused to do that version.
I think she was always going to do it. I think it was always a question of the money. And I think, finally she had the upper hand, and I know she got paid what she asked for, so.
Ultimately, a deal was done, and we were able to make the movie we all wanted to make, as opposed to one that was, we felt, simply a ripoff rather than a part of what has become, obviously, a very successful series.